deal I think both leaders thought was worth getting across the finish line finally.
Right. Exactly 1 year ago, Prime Minister Modi was here in Washington, D.C., and 1 year down the line, we see this deal happen. What really changed in this 1 year? What really took it to the finish line?
Well, first, I lost an internal bet in my team of 5 cents because I thought we'd actually get the deal done ahead of when the leaders announced. They thought they'd get it done by last fall. And I felt you had all the markings, all the trappings on both sides to get the deal done, maybe even faster than that. But it took a little longer than expected. And, of course, there's a couple of times during that period that it sounded like they had an agreement inked and ready for the president's signature, but the president decided not to sign it. You know, I think at the end of the day, two major things that really helped to break the logjam. First and foremost, the United States wanted India's commitment to buy a certain percentage of American goods to make sure that that trade deficit starts to get repaired, because the United States has about a 2-to-1 trade deficit with India. But the second thing, you know, is going back to agriculture market access. For India, there's staple grains that are simply a no-go. Strong red lines politically that we know Prime Minister Modi can't cross. You know, for the United States, it's a bit of game of chicken, thinking that, is this a negotiating ploy? Is that a real red line? So I have a hunch that when we see the final details of the agreement, we're going to see that a lot of staple grains that are grown by Indians across the country were probably left out of the market. You might have some agriculture market access and more novel fruits and vegetables and nuts and things like that. But that's the two things. What is India going to buy from the United States to offset the trade deficit, and how we're going to manage agriculture market access to India, knowing there's red lines.
Of course, we're waiting for the fine print. We're waiting for releases from both sides. But this last 1 year has not been easy in terms of the diplomacy that went on between the two countries. But you had, Ambassador Gore probably, giving it a push. You had Ambassador Quatra here. You had, officials who've been working on this for almost a year now. Who do you credit this to?
Well, I think there's a lot of actors. I mean, at the end of the day, the fact that India approached the United States pressure with a really calm head. Last time that President Trump was in office, we actually had a medium-intensity trade war. People kind of forget, but the United States hit India pretty hard with our tariffs against steel and aluminum. That wasn't India-specific, but India was hit hard. The United States revoked India's trade preferences under the GSP program for developing countries. India initiated retaliatory tariffs. There India was actually fighting back aggressively. And even though the leaders had a warm relationship, on trade at least, you still had a lot of fighting happening on both sides. This time, India didn't fight back. They put their head down, tried to find a pathway forward, put things on the table, kept being comfortable reopening negotiations and trying to comply. So first and foremost, tip of the hat on the Indian side for not taking the bait and choosing to use this as a moment to fight. But of course, we did have one substantial change in recent months, which is the President nominating one of his own personal advisors, Sergio Gore, as ambassador. So once the final report is written about what happened, I wouldn't be surprised if having somebody that close to the President to really get a better understanding about what is a red line and what's not probably was helpful too in unlocking it this last phase.
For talking to ANI, talking about the announcements, what we saw on Truth Social today, followed by Prime Minister Modi's announcement, what are the key takeaways here?
Well, we still don't have a lot of details about the agreement itself, but it looks like both sides have basically agreed for the United States to get better market access into India, including dropping non-tariff barriers, as President Trump put out, but also removing most of the tariffs that the United States has placed against India. So market access, certainly we know. What we don't know is what other things were included in there. There is also the agreement that India would buy $500 billion of American goods. But again, we don't know the makeup of that. We have some indication from the release and over what time frame. So just the barest of details, but certainly gave a shot in the arm of good news today.
Talking about the 25% tariffs on Russian crude that India has been slapped by, I did confirm with the White House, and they said that this would be lifted only if India ceases its imports. How do you see this play out?
Well, the previous times the United States put pressure on India for the places it was buying hydrocarbons, most notably, I think, in recent years, Venezuela and Iran. India complied if the threat that the United States presented was quite real. And here we know the president has been using tariffs very aggressively for a range of reasons, whether it's narcotics coming from other countries and of course, providing reciprocal market access to American companies. So it's been a tool that's been employed quite a bit. And, from India's vantage point, the United States is by far the most important export market, both in terms of goods and services. So the fact that you had these tariffs, even if there were some carve-outs, that is a very real and credible threat. So not surprising, but I think India wanted to make sure that they got something in return. And, getting the tariffs reduced in exchange for opening up its own market, which India has been happy to do with other trade partners partners recently. It's a deal I think both leaders thought was worth getting across the finish line finally.